Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pancasila course for international student. And in this part, we will learn about the anti-corruption education, and it's the first session of the series of anti-corruption education. With me, Zilal Al Furqan, your lecturer for this course. Let me start with one fact about Indonesia's Corruption Perception Index or CPI in 2023. So if you see here on the slide, I provide some graph, some charts, some data here. The first one on the right corner, I have the data from the most recent Indonesia's CPI from CPI 2023. Based on the corruption perception index that is gathered by the Transparency International, Indonesia ranks 115 out of 180 countries for this year. And when we talk about the rank, actually it decreases from 110 to 115. It means that our rank is lowered. Even though the score that we get is remains the same, which is 34. So we see here there are no score change since 2022 because we still got 34. Yeah. Um, in the world, we our rank is on 115, and in ASEAN itself, as you see here, we are ranked 6 out of 10 countries. Well, looking at this data, what do you think about our condition in Indonesia? Corruption Perception Index is an index that measures the corruption throughout the world. So if you see from the line graph, within the last 20 years, within the last 10 years, we've actually gotten better, yeah, until 2019. So you see here in 2013, the score that we got was on the 32, and it goes up until 2019 we got 40, and it was the best that we had. And still, yeah, it was the best until today, 40. But since then it went down. Look at the trend. It keeps going down until 2022 and 2023. Our score is actually as bad as it was in 2014. Well, this means that the condition of our country is not good in terms of corruption. Well, let's see other facts that we have about corruption. It's an opinion made by Alvin Nicola in the editorial of the Jakarta Post. So this article mentioned that Indonesia may need 100 years to be free from corruption. The main issue here, the political corruption. The Jakarta Post stated that the political corruption is at the heart of the rampant graft that is prevalent in Indonesia, and tackling that will take a commander-in-chief with resolve who is fully cognizant of the real impacts. It means we may need 100 years only if during these 100 years We have a leader that is cognizant, that is that do real things, real impactful things, and consistent to decreasing the corruption, to eradicate the corruption in our country, in Indonesia. That's how bad it is. And it's worsened by the fact that the chief of the Corruption Eradication Commission, or KPK, was arrested due to the corruption. So he's allegedly asking for ransom to potential corruption suspects so that the case will be erased, or and he used the case to settle he used the case to threaten the possible suspects. So can you imagine that, how bad the condition that we have here? Well, luckily he was arrested, he is arrested, and there are some um, tidying up, we can call it, in KPK, so that we have a new, not really the new, but we have the acting head of KPK now that is considered better. Yeah. uh, so yeah, let's put all these things in a perspective. The CPI has gotten worse, and it becomes worse now that the head of the anti-corruption task force that we have, that's supposed to fight against the corruption, that's supposed to um, make Indonesia free of corruption, he's involved in such crime. He is a felon now. So it's like an irony, right? That is the condition that we have today. So I think it's very clear that we are now on an emergency situation in terms of corruption. Before we go further talking about the corruption, let's take a look at the definition of corruption, because it's very important. If we want to fight something, if we want to do something, it's very important that we understand what that thing is. So if we want to fight corruption, we need to understand what corruption is. So from Black's Law Dictionary, corruption is depravity, perversion, or taint on impairment of integrity, virtue, or moral principle, especially the impairment of public officials' duty by bribery. Well, Black's Law Dictionary that I use to define corruption here is 1990 edition. So um, the focus at the time was so much on bribery. So the corruption happened was because of the evil intent of someone, yeah, of this evil person, yeah, or it can be businessman, it can be somebody from private sector, to bribe the public officials. So the intent to corrupt the public official came from the people. However, this definition is actually modified, so that here I chose two other definitions. One was the World Bank definition in 2000, which defined corruption is the abuse of public power for private gain. So you can see here that within 10 years, the perspective of corruption has evolved. In 1990, the one that is evil, the one that has the intention of crime, was more on the person who's giving bribes to the public official. But here, since 2000, we see that the focus is more on the abuse of power. So basically, corruption is about abuse of public power for private gain. Either the gain is about um, personal enrichment, or it can be about gaining more power. So basically, it's abuse of public power. It can come in the form of bribery or any other forms. And Transparency International defines corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gains, which erodes trust, weakens democracy, hampers economic development, and further exacerbates inequality, poverty, social division, and the environmental crisis. So we see here Transparency International puts more context, especially about the impact of the corruption itself. So it erodes trust, weakens democracy, so it badly impacts the political system that we have now. It hampers economic development, even it exacerbates inequality. So corruption is actually promoting inequality, it promotes poverty, social division, even the environmental crisis. So there are various acts of corruption. There are various forms of corruption. The offenses can be bribery and embezzlement. So basically, you are giving something. You're providing graft, or you're giving graft to take some advantage. Let's say that you want to build a company and to make um, so that you can get the permit faster. You bribe the official. That is corruption. Or embezzlement. That's also corruption. When the public official um, intentionally asking for something so that they will help you, or if you don't give extra money to them, if you don't tip them, they will halt the process. That's also corruption. Corruption can also be in the form of trading in influence. So trading in influence is that is not about the economic gain, but it's power play. How you get more influence. Um, there was a case, yeah, from long time ago when this businessman he bribed a police officer, and the bribe was not in the form of money, but in the form of providing high level person to be caught by the police in narcotic case. So the purpose was so that this police officer would get promoted because of the high profile case that he got. And when the police officer got promoted, then this businessman will get lots of benefits, lots of more influence from higher people in the hierarchy. That's an example of trading in influence. The third form of corruption is abuse of functions. So, abuse of functions is basically abuse of power. Let's say that because you're a civil servant and then you abuse your authority to get the economic gain or any other form of gain that you can get. Illicit enrichment, I think this one is very obvious. Yeah. It's like you're enriching yourself, but you hide it where you get it from. Okay. So actually, it's highly related to money laundering. Well, in illicit enrichment, so you gain something economically in illegal way, and then you hide it. For example, you hide it from the bank system. Yeah, so your transaction are not by wire, but you do everything by cash because by cash it's more difficult to trace. Okay, and then you keep all this dirty money not in the bank, but you turn it into something else. And here, by doing that, here comes the money laundering. So this money that you get from embezzlement, from bribery, from the corruption, you need to clean it. You need to make it look legit. That's the idea of money laundering. You clean this dirty money from something illegal to something legal. So, for example, you use the cash by and then you give it to someone, you hire someone, let's say an influencer in the social media. You hire this person and you give a sum of money to this person to build a company, let's say skincare company. So through this skincare company, the capital that they get, the investment they get are all in form of cash they got from corruption, but they use it in this business, and then the animosity of the investor is guaranteed. So they use the money in legit business, and then the profit will come back to you. All right, so it will come back to the investor in form of a legal money so that you can use it legally to buy things in this country. Okay, another form of money laundering is that you use someone's ID card, or maybe you buy a piece of land somewhere, but not using your name, maybe using the name of your assistant or someone you trust. And maybe after several years, you pretend to buy back, you pretend to buy that land so that it looks like you're buying land from your assistant so that um, it becomes yours. That's also a form of money laundering. And then concealment. So basically, illicit enrichment, money laundering, concealment is also related. Concealment here is you're concealing where you get the fund from. Maybe through shell companies, through tax haven countries, for example. So they cannot trace your money. The authority in Indonesia cannot trace your money because you're using the shell company. Yeah, it happened um, in Indonesia as well, and it was revealed by the Panama Papers that some businessmen in Indonesia do that, but not for corruption. It's for tax evasion. Well, who knows? We have similar thing for corruption. And the last form of corruption is the obstruction of justice. Okay, so if you remember the case of Ferdi Sambo, okay, he was sentenced for obstruction of justice because he used his influence, he used his power, he used his function as we call it in bahasa Indonesia kabit propam, yeah. So he's the head of the internal affair in the police force in Indonesia. He used that seniority, he used that position to tell his inferiors to hide the crime that he did. That is obstruction of justice. Other forms of obstructions of justice are bribing the judge, for example, or bribing the attorney, the general attorney, so that you can get lower sentence, lower imprisonment. That's also obstruction of justice. Well, there are still many forms. Yeah, what we have here, the seven types that I provide here are only um, the main forms of the corruption. Okay, so hopefully now you know what considered corruption. Yeah, um, gratifying some service or graft. That's also a form of corruption. We can consider that graft as bribery. Okay, so for example, let's say that you don't get a good score in your course and you approach the lecturer, you bring something quite expensive for your lecturer with the intention to influence him to give you better score. It means you're giving, you bribe him, or you giving graft to him. Maybe you don't explicitly say that you're giving that stuff or that thing for him or her to help you. Maybe you mention it, you implied it to him or her. So you didn't say it right away, sir, please help me with my score. Here's some new iPhone for you. Not like that, but you're just giving, hey, sir, thank you for your time teaching me. Here's, I give you, I have a new iPhone for you, something like that. That can be considered bribery. Why? Because you're giving the iPhone in the relation of your lecturer's profession. To know whether it's a graph or not, let's think if the person is not your lecturer, or if your score is maybe when you predict it, when you count the score that you got is A, will you give that iPhone? And why don't you give that iPhone later after you get your score when it cannot be changed anymore? Why should you give it when there's still time for your lecturer to revise your score? If it happened like that, it's considered graft, it's considered bribery. So you have to be careful with that. Now, what are the costs of corruption? Corruption costs many aspects in our life, but I divide it into four major costs or four major impacts. The first one is political costs. Well, in political costs, corruption may cause distrust. The people can lose their trust towards the government and they will become apathetic towards the political system. And of course, it will worsen the democracy if it happens that way. It also has social costs. When people who have more money can bribe the legal system, it can cause social conflict, it can cause social division between the poor and the rich. People will say that only the rich they can get um, good legal system or good attorney. Only the rich that can have a good health facility. But if you don't have money, they cannot get it because you are prioritized when you have more money. That can affect this nation socially. The conflict or the social division, the social gap will be widened, and that may cause an unrest in this country. Corruption also costs the environment. Why? Because to be true, in many business that cost the environment, they bribe the officials, they bribe the public officials so that they can get away from providing the waste management system, for example, and they will throw their waste directly to the river or to the sea or to the nature because they think that they already buy the authority. The authority is already in their hands. And that can cause greater environmental damage. The economic cost, well, I believe you're quite familiar with this one. Corruption will make the poor becomes poorer. So, and the economic development will be on halt because the economic system doesn't go well and the inflation will go up because of this because of the corruption. So for example, without bribing the official, if I build a company, let's say I build a restaurant, I can sell the food in my restaurant 20,000 rupiah. But because I have to bribe for the permit, I have to bribe the health inspector, I have to bribe um, many other people, I cannot sell my food 20,000 rupiah. I have to increase it. I have to sell it like 30,000 rupiah if I want to get profit from this. So the price of many products will go up because of the corruption. Now you know the cause or you know the effect, how bad the impact is. Let's see some headline from the news that I got. Digital equality in Indonesia jeopardized by alleged BTS corruption. So, if you remember, in the pandemics, um, the Minister of Communication was allegedly um, make what do we call it, a fictitious project. Yeah. So in the pandemic, all the learning or the studying that the students have are turned to distance learning. But the problem here is that in many area, the students or even the teachers, they don't have good reception for 4G. So the president told the Ministry of Communication and Information to build more BTS 4G based transceiver station for the frontier outmost and remote regions in Indonesia so that even the most remote area in Indonesia can get better internet. But because of the corruption from, I don't know, yeah, only like less than 10% of the project was built. Even until today, the pandemic has long gone. This building, this BTS project hasn't been finished yet. So digital equality become jeopardized due to this corruption, which means the education level is also jeopardized, especially in the remote areas in Indonesia. Another case is still related to education. It happened in 2022. College admission scandals allegedly happen in various universities in Indonesia. So there are certain people who bribed the university officials so that their children will be admitted to that university. Can you imagine that? It's like bribery becomes something that is normalized for them. So when the corruption is so vast, is so great in one place, in one country, people will normalize it. And that is very scary. Even from Transparency International, I got this paper, yeah, stating that companies face a high corruption risk when dealing with the public administration, which can be a major financial burden on firms. According to the World Bank's 2015 Enterprise Survey report, one in five businesses reported that gifts are expected to secure government contracts and licenses. Over 45% of firms reported that a gift was expected to get an import license or a construction permit, which is significantly higher than the East Asia and Pacific average of 16%. This is the report by Transparency International about the business climate in Indonesia. So the corruption hindered our economic development because the companies, yeah, like my friend's company, chose to build the rep office in Malaysia instead of Indonesia, even though the living cost in Malaysia is higher than Indonesia actually. Also, the standard of the wages for the employees are higher in Malaysia compared to Indonesia. The reason is that there are too many accidental costs that we have here in Indonesia. There are too many unbudgeted costs for bribing people, for bribing officials, and so on. Yeah, so can you imagine when people want to invest, we need investments to build our country. We need investment to develop this nation. But the investors, they are afraid to invest because of the corruption. That's what happens basically. Maybe you would ask why corruption occurs, why people get corrupted. Well, corruption can be caused by three factors. The first one is institutional imperfection. When an institution is not transparent, they don't have check and balances, they don't publish their financial report publicly so that the people cannot do check and balances, corruption will tend to happen. So remember that the corruption is not only based on the evil intention of the doers, but also there are so many holes in the legal system, in the institution system, in the check and balances system. So institutional imperfection is very,
Low
very
battery. Please charge.
highly is a very affecting factor in terms of corruption. That's why transparency is important. The second reason will be human vacancy, the greed of the human. The human tends to want more. Well, maybe years ago we thought that the corruption happens because the public servants, the civil servants that we have here in Indonesia, they are not paid well. But even now, after their salary is increased over and over again, corruption still occur. That's because of greed,
Low
the human
battery.
vacancy.
Please charge.
And the last one, which is also important, is accepting social attitude, normalizing the corruption behavior. When people normalize that, oh, if you want to make a driving license, you need to bribe. Or when you go to, when you want to make your ID card, you have to bribe. And it becomes a norm because people normalizing it, it becomes a social attitude. So people accept it as part of their life, even though it's bad, even though it's form of corruption. If that happens, people will not be care about the corruption anymore because it's already part of their life and that is very
Low
dangerous.
battery. Please charge.
So remember, all these trifecta, they cause corruption, and to the first step that we need to do actually to fight the corruption is transparency. That's for the institutional imperfection. The transparency of every institution that in this country is highly needed. And then for the human vacancy, you need integrity. You need to uphold your integrity. That also works in accepting social attitude. You must not normalize those vicious attitude. So the next question will be, what can we do about it? I know that you're just students, So maybe you think that you cannot do
Low
much,
battery.
but
Please
actually,
charge.
university students in Indonesia plays important role in fighting, in eradicating corruption, because based on history, students plays important role in our history in changing the course of the history of the nation. So you can do a lot basically. The first thing that you have to do is to be aware of the forms of corruption. As I mentioned before, if you want to fight something, you have to understand what that thing that you have to fight is. By aware of the forms of corruption, so you won't do it unintentionally. So when you see it, you know, oh, it's a form of corruption. And of course, encourage transparency in your community. Maybe you're in
Low battery. Please charge.
extracurricular activity in an organization. Encourage transparency there. Yeah, it's very important because in many places in Indonesia, they have this mindset that you cannot be too open about the finance. Yeah, it also happened, for example, in my community. Yeah, in my housing community that we have here. Yeah, homeowners association. I happen to be the chief of the homeowner association that we have here in my neighborhood. And then um, when I was elected, I made all the financial report can be downloaded by
Low
anyone
battery.
anytime.
Please charge.
So I encourage the transparency. However, there are few residents that objected to that. One of them even said to me that what I did was not transparency, but it's too transparent. It's nakedness. I cannot be. I cannot let everyone, the all residents, know what's behind my kitchen, what happened in my kitchen. Well, imagine that. Even when someone wants to be transparent, when someone encouraged transparency, some people
Low
still
battery.
object to it
Please charge.
because, as I said before, one of the factors of the corruption is accepting or normalizing the social attitude. So for them, not knowing how their leaders manage the money is becoming a norm. They think it's a secret. But being transparent is actually good because I can get the check and balances from many residents. The third thing that you can do is to speak up. You can do it anonymously now. The virality that we have on the media nowadays is very high, and you can
Low
be
battery.
anonymous in the
Please
social media.
charge.
Or if you don't want to speak up, you can use tech solutions. Now there are many institutions, they are making new apps. They're making apps to makes the licensing and everything else easier. Use them because when you use the tech solutions, it's traceable. It will be difficult for um, the bad boys in that institution to halt your the process of your request because it is traceable. It can be traced easily by their supervisor, basically. Also, you can help spreading the awareness of corruption through memes, comics, posters, short video,
Low
maybe
battery.
any
Please
creative things
charge.
that you usually do. We need to raise the awareness that corruption is not normal, bribery is not normal, tipping the public officials is not normal. You can also join anti-corruption community. There are lots of anti-corruption community. And of course, it's important to safeguard your integrity because only your integrity that can prevent you from doing corruption. And as students, of course, protest when you see corrupt things occur. Yeah, like it happens a few years ago when the UE students they protested about the amendment of the
Low
KPK law.
battery. Please
It's a
charge.
good, it's a healthy and democratic way to speak up, do a protest, and of course, pay zero bribes. Don't normalize bribing. Now, from the perspective of Pancasila, it's very clear, I think, that corruption violates the five precepts of Pancasila. In terms of divinity of the Great One, or Ketuhanan yang Maha Esa, all religions are against corruption, condemn corruption. Well, here I provide you two verses from two major uh, religion that we have in Indonesia, which is Islam and Christianity. In Islam, in Al-Baqarah, verse 188, it is said,
Low battery.
don't
Please charge.
consume. So the God said, don't consume one another's wealth unjustly. Have deliberately bribed authorities in order to devour a portion of others' property, knowing that it is a sin. So it's sinful for you to consume another wealth unjustly when you deliberately bribe authorities. In Christianity, in the Proverbs 15:27, it is said that whoever is greedy for unjust gain troubles his own household, but he who hates bribes will live. So hates bribe, those are the people who will live. But when you are greedy
Low battery.
for
Please
unjust
charge.
gain, you're making yourself rich from your greed, it troubles your own household. In any other religions, I think we can find similar verses. On the second precept, just and civilized humanity, of course, corruption harms the humanity values a lot. Also in third precept, the unity of Indonesia, corruption raises distrust amongst the people, it causes social division, and it triggers conflicts. On the fourth precept, democracy guided by the inner wisdom in the unanimity arising out of deliberations among representatives. Well, corruption undermines democracy as policy making will be skewed in the interest
Low
of the few.
battery. Please
So when
charge.
the law, when the policy only serve the interest of the few, not the interest of the people, that's no longer democracy basically. And citizens will lose more trust in political institutions, and that can cause a problem. On the last precept, social justice for all people in Indonesia. Yeah, of course, with corruption, the system favors only the highest bidders or the few. Social justice will not be established if the corruption persists. So, even using the Pancasila, the foundation of this country, corruption against the all five precepts that we have here. So,
Low battery. Please
all
charge.
in all, we see that corruption is very bad and it happens in many aspects in our life. Even some says that corruption is systemic in Indonesia. That's why it's very difficult to erase it. It's very difficult to fight it. But we cannot stop fighting. We cannot normalize corruption. Well, one quote that I always admire is the one by Albert Einstein that we have here on the screen. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. So this country will not be destroyed by the corruptors themselves, but by us who watch
Low
the
battery.
corruptors
Please
without doing
charge.
anything. So do something. Raise the awareness on the corruption in
Power off.
Indonesia.